All right, so this time we're going to really dive deep, into human history.
Yeah.
And here's the kicker, not just understanding it, but maybe even figuring out how to make it better.
Okay.
Can we actually do that? That's a huge DE goal, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for this deep dive, we've got this academic excerpt. It's called Understanding and Improving Human History, a framework. And let me tell you, it just jumps right into these really big, complicated questions.
It really does. I mean, right away, it challenges this whole idea that history is just, a bunch of facts.
Yeah, yeah.
It's more like how we interpret those facts.
Right.
And that can get, pretty subjective.
Yeah, totally. It's like we all bring our own baggage to how we see things, don't we? Our backgrounds, the cultures we come from. I bet even our mood that day probably affects how we look at a historical event.
Oh, absolutely.
And the source, it gives this really interesting example with progress.
Okay.
So think about the invention of the car, right? One person might see that as freedom, innovation, amazing.
Right.
But someone else, they might only see pollution, the environmental damage.
Yeah, totally different.
Two totally different takes, but same piece of history. Makes you think, where do you fall on that progress idea?
It does, and that's just one tiny example. The source, it goes even deeper into how just human behavior itself, it's already so complex.
Oh, yeah.
We're not robots making perfectly logical decisions.
Thank goodness.
Right. There are emotions, there are beliefs, sometimes hidden motives.
Ooh, juicy.
It's imagine trying to solve a puzzle, but half the pieces are gone. And the ones you do have, they keep changing shape.
Huh. Okay, I love that analogy. It really makes it clear, even with the best intentions, getting a totally objective view of the past, nearly impossible.
Exactly. And that kind of leads into what the source calls the problem of perspective.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
So think of, the American Revolution. Classic example. For ages, it was taught from a very specific viewpoint, right? The colonists, the heroes fighting for freedom, evil British monarchy, yada, yada.
Yeah, we all learned that version.
Right. But what about the Native American tribes? They were already here. What was for them?
Oh, good point.
Or the enslaved Africans. Brought over against their will, completely left out of that freedom narrative.
Right. The story changes completely depending on whose perspective you're looking at.
Absolutely. And this isn't just, old stuff. It's what we're dealing with right now with today's events. Whose voices get heard, whose get silenced, that shapes how future generations understand U.S.
Whoa.
Makes you think, huh?
It does. So it's less about finding the one truth and more about understanding how all these different perspectives, they interact and clash.
Yeah.
Okay, so with all this bias, this subjectivity built in, can we even talk about improving history?
That is the million-dollar question. And, the source, it doesn't pretend to have all the answers, but it does give us this potential framework for getting a more, I guess you could say, nuanced understanding of the past, maybe even more accurate.
Okay, I am so ready to dive into that framework. It's got 7 key components, each one kind of helping us sharpen our history thinking skills. So hit me with number 1. What's the first one? All
right, so the first one is multiple perspectives, which is really about actively seeking out those diverse voices and experiences.
Gotcha.
That American Revolution example we were just talking about.
Yeah.
To really understand it, you got to go beyond the usual textbooks, Explore accounts from Native Americans, enslaved Africans, British loyalists, everyone.
It's we're building this giant mosaic, and each little tile is a different perspective. And the more different those tiles are, the richer the whole picture gets.
Exactly. And that leads right into the second component, critical analysis.
Okay.
Now that we've got all this info from all these different sources, we got to analyze it critically.
So it's we're detectives now.
Kinda.
Looking for clues about the author's biases, their motives, any gaps, inconsistencies, right?
Exactly. Ask yourself,
okay,
who wrote this? Why did they write it? What are they maybe leaving out?
Ooh, getting suspicious. So we got to challenge ourselves to be skeptical readers, question everything, dig deep, understand the whole context around the event.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, this is getting good. And then what's number 3?
All right, so number 3 is interdisciplinary approaches.
Oh.
This one's all about expanding our history toolkit.
Ooh, I like that.
Bringing in insights from other fields,
Okay, give me an example. How can, economics or environmental science help us understand history better?
All right, so imagine you're studying the fall of the Roman Empire, right? A purely historical account, it might focus on politics, military stuff, that kind of thing.
The usual suspects.
Right. But if you bring in economics, suddenly you might see how inflation, trade disruptions, even income inequality played a role.
No, interesting.
Or from an environmental perspective, you might discover that climate change, resource depletion, contributed to the decline.
Wow. So it's like suddenly we're seeing the event in 3D.
Yeah. Well,
Layering these different perspectives on top of each other, we get a much more complete picture.
right.
And it's not just about understanding the past, right?
No.
It's also recognizing how those same patterns, they might be happening in now in our time.
Exactly.
Okay, that's a great point. It makes history feel so much more relevant to like our everyday lives.
Absolutely. And we'll keep exploring that connection as we go through the rest of the framework.
Ooh, I can't wait. So we've got these first three, right? Multiple perspectives, the critical analysis thing, and bringing in all the other fields, the interdisciplinary stuff,
Yeah.
all kind of pointing toward building this like more complete, accurate picture of what went down, you know? What's next on the list?
Okay, so the fourth one, it might surprise you a little bit. It's empathy and understanding.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's about like connecting with the past on this deeper level, an emotional level.
That's interesting, because isn't history all about dates and facts and stuff? Like things that already happened? What's emotional about that?
Well, yeah, those dates and facts, they matter. They're important. But they only tell us part of the story, really.
Okay.
To really understand history, we got to try to step into the shoes of the people who lived it, you know? What were they hoping for? What scared them? What were their motives?
Yeah.
What were the challenges they faced? And how did they react?
I see what you mean. It's like reading about the Black Death. That's one thing.
Yeah.
But to imagine like actually living through it, the fear, the uncertainty, all the loss.
It's different.
It does. Suddenly it's so much more real, impactful.
Exactly. And by fostering that empathy, that's how we start seeing people from the past, not just as names in a book, but as like real people, complex, who struggle with a lot of the same stuff we do today.
So it's like building a bridge between then and now, finding those common threads that connect us across time.
Yeah, I like that.
Okay, so we got multiple perspectives, critical thinking, all those other fields of study, and now empathy. What's the fifth part of this, like, history decoding framework?
All right, number 5 is continuous revision and dialogue. Big words, but basically it's a reminder that history is never really settled.
Oh, that makes sense.
New evidence always pops up, new perspectives come out, and so our understanding of what happened, it's always being refined, reinterpreted.
Yeah, because we're always learning new stuff, right?
Yeah.
Finding new info. It'd be weird if our idea of history just stayed frozen in time.
Right. So this component, it encourages us to be open to those new interpretations, you know, engage in debate, have discussions, be willing to change our own minds about what we thought we knew as new evidence comes out.
So it's like history is a conversation that's always going on, always evolving.
Exactly.
Okay, up to number 6 now. What's next?
This one is focus on patterns and trends. It's all about zooming OUT a bit, you know, away from the individual events and looking for those bigger patterns, the trends that repeat over time.
Okay, so instead of like one specific battle or one king or whatever, we're looking for the underlying themes that drive how humans act and how that shapes history.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like, think about how many times we see empires rise and fall throughout history.
Oh, yeah.
They often follow a pretty similar path, you know, expansion, conquest, then internal problems, and eventually collapse.
Happens every time.
Right. But by understanding that pattern, we can get insights into power dynamics, the struggles of staying stable, that kind of thing.
It's like history is giving us a roadmap, showing us what not to do and maybe what paths lead to like more stability, more good stuff happening.
I like that, a roadmap. Yeah, studying these patterns, these trends, hopefully we can learn from past mistakes and make better choices now.
Makes sense. So that's 6. Multiple perspectives, the critical analysis, all the interdisciplinary stuff, empathy, the revision thing, and focusing on patterns. That's quite a toolkit. What's the final piece?
Okay, so the 7th, the last one, is application and action. And it's all about, well, taking what we've learned and actually applying it in our lives today.
So it's not enough to just like understand what happened. We got to actually use that knowledge to make things better at NW.
Exactly. History, it gives us these incredible insights into how people behave, how power works, the consequences of choices, all that. But that knowledge, it's only really meaningful if we use it to make better decisions, take better actions, and ultimately try to create a more fair and just society.
It's like History is this huge resource, right? All this human experience we can learn from to help us deal with the craziness of the 21st century.
Exactly.
And by using this framework, approaching history with a critical mind, but also an open mind, that's how we make sure the past isn't just a record of what happened. It becomes a source of wisdom, inspiration, even guidance for what we do next.
I love that.
Me too. So after all this deep diving into understanding and improving human history, what's the biggest takeaway you want our listener to walk away with?
I think the most important thing is that history isn't just something that happened to other people long ago. It's this ongoing process, and we're all part of it. We shape it, and it shapes us in so many ways.
Yeah.
And by engaging with it thoughtfully, critically, with empathy, that's how we get a deeper understanding of the past. But it also helps us create a more informed, just, and hopeful future.
I love that idea. History is this ongoing process. Really makes you feel like we're not just like watching it happen, but actually part of making the story. But it also makes me wonder, if history's so subjective, so open to different interpretations, how do we make sure it's used to inform, not to manipulate?
That's a big one, for sure. And the source really pushes us to think about that. Think how often we see history being used, like selectively, to justify things happening end of view or to back up certain viewpoints.
It happens all the time, right?
Right. It's like picking and choosing only the events or the interpretations that fit a particular narrative and ignoring or downplaying the stuff that doesn't.
It's like every debate, every argument, people pull out historical examples to be like, see, I'm right.
Exactly.
But how can we tell if they're using those examples responsibly or just trying to twist things to win the argument?
Well, that's where all those framework components we've been talking about, they come in. If we're serious about using history the right way, we got to apply those principles, the multiple perspectives, the critical analysis, empathy, all of it.
So we can't just take things at face value, got to dig deeper, question what we assume, even be ready to challenge our own ideas about the past.
Exactly. It's like a call to action for everyone, Be more critical about the history we're consuming, demand those more nuanced narratives, the inclusive ones, and push back against anyone trying to use the past to manipulate or divide us now.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And this is where that continuous revision and dialogue part that becomes so important. We got to create a culture where it's okay to question the usual stories, debate different interpretations, and just admit that, hey, our understanding of history, it's always changing.
Yeah, like that saying, the only constant is change.
Right. History itself is always changing. New evidence, new perspectives, it never stops.
And if we embrace that idea of ongoing evolution, history being this dynamic process, always in motion, then maybe we're less likely to use it like a weapon,
Exactly.
Man, this deep dive has been seriously thought-provoking. It's really changed how I think about history, how I interact with it.
I feel that. It's a good reminder, history isn't just memorizing dates and names.
Yeah.
It's about engaging with the past in a way that shapes our present and our future.
Okay, so as we wrap up this whole deep dive into understanding and improving human history, I want to leave our listener with one last thing to chew on. If we really believe that understanding the past is the key to a better future, what's our responsibility as individuals? How do we engage with history in that thoughtful, critical, empathetic way?
Ooh, that's a good one, a powerful question. And I really hope every listener will think about that as they keep exploring history, this vast, ever-changing world.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep those history-loving minds engaged.
This is DigitView.